Hey, good morning, everybody. Glad to be back with you this Saturday, 2020. My name is Ed Samuel. I'm a career coach with a firm called Sam Manova. We're based in Kennett Square, PA, and serve clients in the greater Philadelphia area and across the U.S. I hope and pray that you and your family are safe in the midst of this pandemic. And I see signs of recovery. People are going back to work. People are landing jobs, but highly competitive, challenging. And in some cases, many people are interviewing and then things just go into slow mode. So you can't assume too much in this current environment. But, I had done some work for one of the networking groups of kind of comparing the recovery that happened in 2008 and what's happening now with this recovery that we're going through, this COVID-19. But one of the things that I see that's very different is that right now I see more jobs for recruiters. Firms, third parties, they seem to be hiring recruiters, and that's a good sign because that means the employers are looking to hire, and there's not enough recruiters out there. So if you're looking to make a career change, that's certainly one field to take a hard look at. One of my clients most recently did a career change and decided to become a recruiter. And now it's been a month, and now he's in his new profession. So now, this morning, though, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about interviewing. And yeah, it is competitive, but so many times I hear people say to me, hey, Ed, I got to the interview and I got to the second round. Maybe I got to the first round, but wow, they asked me some questions I was not prepared for. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about the types of questions you have to be ready for. And I'll give you a little bit of a framework and maybe how best to go about answering it. But, everyone's different. I coach people in this area at length. So I'm just trying to give you a framework. Now, if the questions I pose to you that you're listening to this morning, if you have a challenge answering those questions for yourself, then certainly you can give me a call and we could talk about it. And we'll see if you need something much more extensive in terms of coaching. I have a program that's probably 4 hours long, just focused on interviewing that I work with clients on, and a lot of success in that area. But so let's kind of first, before I get into the specific questions, I think it's always important to frame interviewing in I think maybe 6 different buckets. And interviewing isn't something where you just put in a bucket, you stir it around, and you dump it out, and you say, hey, it's all the same, because it's not. Everybody comes from a different place. Everyone's interviewing really for a different position, and where you're coming from and where you're going makes a big difference in terms of how you frame and answer questions even at times. Now, some cases it won't matter, but in other cases it will. So I put together 6 areas where you might be coming from going into an interview. So one place would be, hey, Ed, I've been in my career for X number of years. I'm unemployed. I love what I do. I'm deeply skilled at what I do. And I really want to go interview for a job that aligns to my industry background, aligns to my skill set. And I just happen to be unemployed. And that's the interview. And I'm going for a job that I've done before. So, okay, that's one kind of interview. Another kind of interview is let's say you landed a job a year ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago, and then things didn't go well for whatever reason, and you find yourself unemployed again. But maybe you're even working in a job currently that you took, and this is your opportunity to kind of get back to where you need to be. But whether it's your last job or whether you're currently employed, maybe only 70% of you are being of your skill set is being utilized. And in this particular case, you're interviewing to kind of bring yourself back to where your prime has been, to where you want it to be, maybe where you were 3 years ago, 4 years ago, but you're only at that 70% mark. You have to be very careful that just because you're doing a role today or that you have been doing a role most recently, it doesn't take away from the fact that you bring a whole lot more to the table 3 or 4 years ago or 10 years ago or even 15 or more years ago. So when you're interviewing for a role, this is about getting you back to what you're really, really good at, because you might be taking a step back. You might even be doing something a bit differently. Now, that strategy for that interview is a little bit different, right? Now, let's say you're going into an interview and your industry is not aligned to your industry background. And your entire interview is to make an argument about transferable skills. Well, then that's a kind of a bit of a different strategy in terms of how you approach that interview, because you have to make an argument based on those transferable skills that you're up to the challenge at hand. And yeah, people do this a lot, but especially important now with so many people being out of work and people are making industry shifts. Now, another challenge is when you happen to be in a role for some time and you have a narrow technical depth, even within an industry. So you could be in healthcare, but yet if your skill in healthcare has been in one specific segment for a long time, then when you go to interview, you have to make an argument that you have industry experience, but your depth of technical knowledge is greater than just that narrow piece that you've been outstanding at. And hopefully you've taken some training. Hopefully you're broadening that technical skill set. But again, in that type of an interview, you have to make a different argument. It has to be a little bit, the strategy has to be a bit different. Now, here's another one. Another one would be, hey, you're doing really well. You're right where you need to be, whether you're working or whether you're unemployed. But you've kind of been at this stage where you're looking for that next job that's really going to stretch you, grow you, promote you, give you more responsibility, not less. Not every job interview, you're taking a step back. There are jobs where people are taking steps forward. But maybe you don't have the experience, maybe you never had this specific role, and you're making an argument in this interview that they need to kind of take a chance on you. They have to, they see what your potential is, and they're going to invest in you based on that potential. That kind of an interview is a little bit different in terms of how you approach it. And then the last piece, and this happens a lot, there are people who are self-employed. Now, self-employed for many people, you could be a realtor and you've been at it for 15 years and you want to make a change. You could be a consultant and you've been at it for 3 years, 4 years, but you want to get back into a corporate or business environment, larger organization. But anytime you're making that type of a shift, you have to make another, really another concerted strategy and effort to make a different kind of an argument, if that's where you're coming from and this is where you're headed. So, I share these 6 areas just to frame everybody who's listening. You probably fall in one of these 6 categories, and that when you're preparing for an interview, or if I'm certainly coaching you during an interview, I'm going to coach you differently depending on where you're coming from and where you're headed. But I never like to just start jumping into interview questions because you have to kind of understand that baseline. So you're able to think about answering the questions based on that baseline. Now I'm going to throw out some what I would consider maybe some of the harder questions. Maybe you might think some of them aren't as hard, but I think these can be hard. And almost every one of these are from real life clients of mine, 400 plus clients over the last 12 years, where I've worked with them and I've heard the types of questions that are posed. And being prepared is way better than not being prepared. Now, here's the first one. And this is a different kind of an interview. Sometimes we go to interviews and say, well, they're going to be really neat people and they're going to ask me questions and I'm going to respond. And we're going to have this really neat conversation back and forth. It will gel. It will feel right. And that does happen. And it can happen on a one-on-one interview. It could happen on a panel interview. And it's a great thing when it does happen. Not that those interviews are necessarily easy, but you're always hoping it's going to be that way at one level. But this is a different interview. This is an interview when you go to the interview, the person sits you down, you're ready to start, and you're ready to kind of go to this traditional interviewing type of questioning. And, the person looks at you, they kind of take your resume and they say, I glanced at your resume. So I have a little bit of an understanding of, your background. But then they take your resume and they literally turn it over. And they say, look, we have about 45 minutes. And in the end, I only have 2 questions for you. And the question 1 is, why you? And then question 2 is, why us? You have 45 minutes. Use your time however you want. Go. What would you do? What would you say? How would you break out what you've done in that 45 minutes? And also save enough time to answer the question of why them? Why did you choose them? That particular firm. But let's go back to the harder one. Why you? See, open-ended questions, they're really, at one level you can say, well, that's kind of wrong. I want to go back and forth a whole bunch of questions, but they're basically giving you the grand stage. They're basically saying, I'm going to roll out the red carpet for you, and you have some time to tell your story. And, what I want you to think about is that if you were to be asked that question, how would you break out 30 minutes of what you've done, your value proposition, what you bring to the table in a way with some examples that really drive home the point you're the right person for the job. And this is what you truly bring to the table. Now, I've coached a lot of people. I worked with a lot of people, and I've talked to countless people that I haven't coached. I would argue that a lot of people aren't prepared for that type of an interview. Sometimes I even had clients that say, okay, there's the whiteboard. Use the whiteboard. Why you? We got 45 minutes. Go. Are you prepared to go to a whiteboard and craft out, some reasoning why it should be you? And you have to show enough detail in 45 minutes because you just can't say, well, I'm this, this, and this. Okay, that took 1 minute. What are you going to say in the next 39 minutes? This has to be well thought out on your part. And I would argue that the people who ask those 2 questions, they may end up hiring better people than the ones that go back and forth with, 10 or 15 packaged interview questions. Yeah. So that's the first tough question I want you to be ready for. And if you don't, again, if you can't answer it, certainly start working on it. Now, here's another one. And this one, this has happened on several firms. And it's interesting, the people who asked this question, head of HR, wasn't a line manager, but I think it's a really interesting thing that happens. So you're having this interview and things are starting to wrap up and you're getting to closure, and they take your resume, they stick it right in front of them again, and they say, hey, Sue, hey, Jim, as we close here, What's one word that I could write on top of this resume that you really want me to remember about you more than anything else? What's the one word that I'm going to write down? And you don't want to be caught with, oh my gosh, and just throw something out. I want you to think about what would that one word be that would really resonate your entire story. And I know at one level you're going to say, well, hey, that's not fair. I'm way more than one word. Yeah, but this isn't about what's fair. I'm just letting you know these are the types of questions you could be thrown at, and you have to be ready for them, and you have to be ready to respond. So, if I was interviewing you at the end of the interview, hey, Sue, what's one word that summarizes you best that I could write at the top of this resume? And then guess what that person does? They get everybody together to take the resumes and say, okay, we interviewed these 10 people, and that particular HR manager has the one word up top. Well, what do we think of Sue? What do we think of Jim? What do we remember about them during these interviews? So be ready for that one word. So here's another one. Here's a question that you've heard at one level, but it goes a little bit deeper now. So, Jim, Sue, what's the one big mistake that you've made that cost you the most up to this point in your career? Not just a mistake, not just any mistake. I'm going to talk about the one big mistake that cost you the most. Not something simple, but where you paid a penalty for it. You're scarred because of it, or it cost your company because of it. Tell me something that cost you something, not just a simple mistake. Because what happens is that when that question gets asked, we tend to jump to, well, let me show you a mistake I made. It really had no implications at all. Not to you, not to the company. It was just a mistake. Maybe, it cost something in terms of productivity. But be ready for that question. Because then if you can't come up with one, then it could hurt your cause. Because they're probing at something about, do you do big work, little work? Are your mistakes big, or are they just really, really tiny? Or are you really being truthful to me? Pretty interesting, right? Now, here's one that I would probably argue is not legal, but one that was asked of several clients over the last 12 plus years. When I throw in my recruiting days, I could tell you it's the last 15 years. But here's a question that you really want to be ready for. And it might happen in nonprofits. It might happen in for-profits. I could tell you this particular question came from let me just think about this. It came from a financial, let's just say a financial services institution. And this client got through all the rounds of interviewing, and there was only one meeting left. And the meeting was with the chairman of the board. And they sat down at, the mahogany table, and they asked this person, I have one question. And this was the very first question. I have one question for you. If you won the lottery, what would you do? If you won the lottery, what would you do? And wow. And this was for a pretty senior role. We're not talking a junior role. We're not talking an hourly position. We're talking this is a pretty senior role. And again, I'm not talking about whether things are legal or not. I'm just saying be prepared because, of course, this person could have looked at him and said, well, yeah, I think that's not a legal question to be asking me. And that probably would have torpedoed his success of landing the job because he ended up getting the job. But he ended up giving him a very thoughtful answer of what would happen if they won the lottery. So, and I think in some regards, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get at, your character. Who are you outside of work? Who are you when it comes to helping others? Who are you when it comes to, is this everything about money? And they gave an amazing answer that was heartfelt, that he had actually thought about. And amazingly, 6 months prior. And then sure enough, the chairman asked that particular question. So the larger issue is that if somebody really pokes at your character a bit through a question like that, are you prepared for it? That's what I'm getting at. So here's another one. Now, this sounds simple. I did a whole radio segment on this, but I want to it's worth going back to. It's just be ready for the simple question. So what are the greatest strengths of your personality? What are the greatest strengths of your personality? And what you have to be careful of is, look up what a personality trait is versus a value. I would tell you 80% of the time when that question's asked, we actually defer to our values, nothing to do with our personality. And let me give you an example. Hey, I'm a really hard worker. That's much more of a value. Nothing to do with your personality. More of a value. And if you don't know the strengths of your personality, I beg you, for a nominal fee, call me up, send me a note. We could do a personality assessment. A pretty simple one, but incredibly effective. I've done hundreds and hundreds of these as a certified DISC personality ID consultant. I also lead a small team that does this work. But if you don't know the answer to that question, you need to get it, because you want to be able to let people know, hey, here are my two greatest strengths. And those greatest strengths of your personality should align to the job, the career, and the job that you're focused on, right? So if you were going for a sales job, the last thing you want to be able to say, or maybe it is still the first thing you want to be able to say, is, hey, I'm highly, highly extroverted. Well, that aligns well to a sales job. But if you said, hey, I'm very, very introverted, and they had in the back of their mind, well, that the big part of this job is selling. That's what they're trying to get at. They're trying to get you to align. Let me continue. Here's another one. You're sitting there, your potential boss is looking at you. And I used to ask this question when I was in corporate America for close to 30 years. Well, 30 years. One of the questions I asked people when I interviewed them, and many of our clients have been asked the same question, but one that you don't want to get knocked off your horse if this question is asked of you. And the question is, so what are the three greatest traits you want in a leader who leads you? What are the three things that really, really mean the most to you for the person that leads you? And what they're trying to do is they're trying to see, is there an alignment? And they're also trying to see, what are your hot buttons when it comes to a boss? And see, when they ask these types of questions, it's really hard to give a packaged answer, right? What do they want to hear? Well, they really want to hear, your authentic truth in terms of what do you really believe what the three greatest traits are. Not who somebody else should, is telling you what they should be. It's what's important to you. Here's another one. And I think because of the unrest that's going on in the U.S. today, I think this becomes even more important. Be ready for a question that comes at you that says, hey, tell me about your views on diversity related to what you've accomplished to date. Open-ended question. Tell me about your views on diversity related to work you've accomplished to date. Be ready for it. People, are trying to change cultures. They're trying to make sure they bring people in that value diversity, that not only value diversity, but where they've actually worked in diverse cultures or have the ability to support, encourage people of diversity in all ways. Here's another one I would want you to be ready for. Hey, Jim, so look, if my boss was in a meeting and proposed a really dumb idea and then asked everyone for their honest opinion, would you give it? What are they getting at there? If that question was posed to you, how would you answer it? Think about it, right? How authentic do you want to be? Here's a couple more. Why do you think you would fit well within our culture? Question mark. And most recently, I had a client land a job at Amazon, and let me tell you something. Wow, it was all about cultural fit. Very little to do with industry alignment, everything to do with teaming, traits, cultural fit. Be ready for that question, and I think that question is going to be asked more and more. And then you're going to get maybe another new type of question thrown at you. And I think it's just, it's tied to the virtual work that we're going through right now. And here it is. Do you have any restrictions that would limit your ability to work effectively on a virtual basis from home? Do you have any restrictions that would limit your ability to work effectively on a virtual basis from home? And some of this is going to be code language, right? Do you have kids running around? Do you have they're doing schoolwork? Do you have dogs? Do you have are you in an environment that's going to be conducive to what they're looking for? All right. Well, hey, we're just about out of time, but hopefully some of these questions are helpful in terms of you being more thoughtful, being a little bit more prepared. Yes, there's all the standard interviewing questions that I could have gone through. I just wanted to hit you with a few others that if you could prepare for some of these questions, I think it actually helps you even more so on the foundational type of interviewing of back and forth and the more traditional interviews that occur. And again, if you need help, certainly reach out to me. So as we wrap up here, for those new to the program, I did publish my first book at the end of 2019 called Optimize Your Resume, Do's and Don'ts, the Sam Nova Way. It's actually available on our secure website, and we include shipping costs, and you can also get it on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Amazon seems to be making a comeback. Shipping was about 3.5 weeks out on Prime, but I think they're doing better now. But we also put it on our own website, secured. And our website is www.samnovainc.com. And you can order the book there. But we've gotten well over 350 positive comments to date. And I've been speaking on the book at many, many forums. In fact, I just spoke last Friday about landing a job at COVID-19 with the Montgomery Networking Forum in Pennsylvania. I speak again on that same topic next Friday, the 11th, September 11th, in the morning with Lehigh Valley professionals. I'll be speaking again next Thursday to the New York City chapter of the Financial Executive Networking Group. I think that's going to be early evening. And I'll be on a national radio program on Monday, September 14th. I think it's scheduled for 3 o'clock. But all of this will be posted on my LinkedIn page in terms of these upcoming speaking events. And if you have not heard me speak before at length, then certainly feel free to jump onto one of those calls. All three of those will be no cost. FANG, you do have to be a member of FANG. But I believe Lehigh Valley, they will accept guests, and then the radio program will be it's nationwide, and you'll be able to listen in there. So that's a little bit about what's happening. So again, if you can find me on LinkedIn and join us on our next Optimize Your Career program. The next program will be on Saturday, September 14th at 8 a.m. And this will be an interesting one because it's going to be continued series on my career spotlight series. I'll be having a unique person on the program. She is a person who has been a professional juggler most of her life until she decided to make a career pivot. And now, instead of being a juggler, she's a thriving book author of multiple books, and she's a book coach. And those looking to publish a book, but more importantly, also looking to transfer. You think you have a career that you can't get out of? Well, pretty interesting to have a juggler juggle their career and get out of it. So again, this is Ed Samuel, career coach with Sam Nova. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send me an email at esamuel@samnovainc.com. That's SAMNOVAINC.com, or call our main number at 610-274-8214. Have a great Saturday and make it a safe one. God bless.